My name is Jesse Sanchez, and I'm a principal at the junior high here in Dinuba Unified School District, and it's probably one of the best jobs in the world. There's a lot of research that says that principals have the best job in the world. I just want to throw that little food for thought out there for you folks. But as we transition, I wanted to share that story with you folks because it really kind of makes this this process and these decisions and this shared leadership and this psychological safety and making some really big decisions, right? We had to make some really big decisions at Dinuba Unified School District, as most schools did, in regards to the closure of schools. And so I wanted to facilitate some questions with our team in regards to what did that look like and sound like, and who were the stakeholders, decision makers in regards to the closure of schools completely. Those were huge processes, and knowing full well the relationship that we had. And so I'm going to have them kind of speak to that based on this question that I wanted to kind of throw this out to our team. The question that I'm asking our team here is, how did you decide to close schools in March? And who were the decision makers involved with school closure, and what did that process look like? So I'm going to have that discussion there.
I don't know if Dr. Hernandez is with us. Joe, are you on your phone? Or?
This is Dr. Hernandez. Can you hear me?
Yeah. So did you hear the question, Dr. Hernandez?
I did. I'm just having technical difficulties. Let me shut iPad down and go right to phone. Okay, that should be better. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Let me comment now. Hopefully, I'm sorry, I wanted to chime in earlier, but I just have had technical difficulties here. I wanted to respond before I respond to the COVID questions. Our culture was toxic. Greg and Marty described it correctly. We had a toxic, destructive culture. And that was because we were fighting with each other and we were using our energy to fight against one another versus working for ways to improve student achievement, but mostly being able to build a positive culture with both unions. It was highly toxic, and that did change about 6 years ago in a dramatic fashion when we started actually having conversations with one another, found out that we had a lot in common, and mostly that we deeply cared about student achievement and the success of our students. So the question right now is COVID-19 and how did we respond? Well, we actually closed schools on March 13th. And I was looking at my calendar the other night to see how that actually developed. On March the 10th, we had an emergency county meeting of all the Tulare County school districts. And at that point in time, we saw what was going on. We saw some of the Bay Area schools that were closing down, and you could see this coming just like a freight train, that we were going to be faced with the strong possibility of having to close down our schools. So that Wednesday morning, what we do, because it's part of what we do, it isn't, yes, it was an emergency, but it's part of what the culture now expects. We did call a meeting that included our union leaders, other teacher leaders, our CSEA leaders, our principals, our directors, and we got into this one big room and we said, hey, we see this coming, so we're going to have to respond, and we don't have very much time to respond. And we've got to do some planning, organization, because we may have to close schools down. And as it was, we had targeted Monday, March 16th. We thought we would have at least until that much time, at least one Monday, to be able to give our kids some final instructions and then close school down. So that decision-making process was a collective decision. We had input. We had to understand the concerns of our employees. And as you know, there were many, many concerns that we had at that time about what we were going to be doing. So that school closure group has now grown into what we currently have as a reopening committee. It's meeting on a regular basis, but now how do we reopen? What are all the different scenarios we have to prepare for? We've had to learn how to, not learn, but we've had to put out joint communications about the decisions that are being made. So our structure has been a highly collaborative structure. One of the last things I'll mention here, and I'll move on, is that we have a lot of forums to listen to our classified employees that are a part of this ongoing process, along with doing just a lot of surveying. But it was something that during an emergency, we didn't have to create. We already had the structures.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. I felt that for the closure, at least, and I think, yeah, we're still on that question. For the closure, it was huge, and it was kind of lucky timing, if you will, but because we met on Tuesday, we closed on Friday. And I think the relationship, again, it's been 5 or 6 years, but that was a really safe room. And I know some districts are just starting this, or you're still having trouble with your union groups. It's a safe place. If you have an idea, you can share your idea. Nobody gets mad. Nobody gets upset. And a lot of thinking goes on in those groups and in those meetings, because again, it's safe and everybody, knows that it's not going to be held against them or disciplinary or anything like that. Without that meeting Tuesday, it would have been really hard for us to shut down. We had everything in place for K through 8. And then the meeting was supposed to be for the high school the following Monday, but we didn't make it. And they kind of had some bumps and bruises going, the first 2 weeks of closure, because they didn't have that debrief meeting with all the directors. So, again, the relationships that are built during good times are how you see during the bad times or like this pandemic.
Greg, we need to also, I think, put out there that we did not operate under an MOU during this time. We, in terms of the teachers and admin, we never had an MOU signed. We simply worked together all the different issues that we were facing, and we just kept on meeting and coming up with, basically building a plan on the fly because we had to close so soon.
Yes, thank you. I forgot about that. Yeah, so any leader groups out there, or teacher leader groups, or the presidents, or I'm not sure who's on the call list here, but yeah, so we were kind of just running with no rules, basically. I mean, we sit down and agree. This is a requirement for teachers. Here's the timeline. Here's the expectations, and we really didn't put anything in writing. We didn't feel that we needed to. One reason for me is because it was changing, and you all lived it. It was changing second by second. So by the time we could have got something actually signed on paper, we would have had to change it and sign another one. So, and I think that's why our process worked so smooth. And we had the successes we did during the closures because we could react in real time without having to do all the paperwork and the politics during that time.
Right. With respect to CSEA, our CSEA president and I were in communication, and she indicated early on that, she understood that we would need to have flexibility in some of the classified positions to help out with meal distribution, with cleaning, and that we were going to have to put our job descriptions aside during this time. Very agreeable. Wasn't even a formal agreement. but she communicated that very early on. One more thing that I need to mention that was pretty significant and indicative of, I think, our culture and the relationship is that when, the COVID-19 hit, we also knew and understood that there was going to be a major financial hit. And the first news was a 10% cut. And we were all reeling from that. And one of the things that president from DTA, Mr. Garrison, mentioned, he said, we just got a 2% raise. If we need to give it back, we'll give it back. We understand. We don't want any layoffs. We don't want any employees to lose their jobs. Now, I ask you out there in the audience, when have you ever heard of that? I've never heard of that before. And, we didn't have to go there, but it was nice to know that you could have that conversation if we got to that point.
Yeah. Well, and what I told Dr. Joe on that topic, I'm pretty sure we're probably the only school districts that are teachers that are going to get a raise next year because of the budget cuts. But we had already planned that with a 2-year deal. This is our second 2-year deal we've done. That's actually brought more peace than anything, I think. And I was talking to some of my elected leaders, and so I offered that to them, and they all kind of looked at me really funny. And I said, well, can you honestly take a raise knowing that an aide or a custodian is going to get laid off work? Like, does that really make sense to you? So everybody backed it, but there was some pushback. It would have been to my detriment, but I think it was worth it, and that's just the trust we have.
Yeah. Greg and others, there's a question on the chat that wants us to talk about how we got through our turbulent past. So I don't want to be taking all the airtime, but I can also answer that.
Thank you, Joe. I want to show a picture. Can you see? No, okay. It's a picture of a van, of one of our White Fleet vans, and maybe some of you have heard this story before. It started with putting people in a van and heading to a conference, not unlike the one that we're attending today. And so I think we went there, one of the ABC school district conferences in Park, and we're left with some good advice. Pick a problem that you have and solve it together. Anything, find a problem and solve it. And I can't remember exactly what that first problem was, but I know we went home and we designed a structure that was already in our contract. It's called the SCPR, which is a Site Committee for Problem Resolution. So that's the acronym. And then there's also a District Committee for Problem Resolution. But we went back and there was a site rep at each school site, and we included our classified employees in that as well. So when problems arose at a lower level, they were solved there before hitting the grievance button. Right, Greg? And so we committed, some of our principals weren't very happy about participating in that. And that was new because the relationships between the site reps, our union, teacher certificated union reps, and our site administrative team was not strong. And so it did ask our site, it asked for a give on each side. It meant that Greg needed to go visit sites. He was our president and met with the site principals and to do some of that problem solving at a lower level. And that really slowed those grievance processes down. Correct, Greg?
Right.
From a classified standpoint, and Anna, I'll have you chime in, we instituted our meet and confer. So a lot of these structures, I'll let Anna talk about that, but the structures and opportunity, we created more, and you have access to those slides. I believe Dr. Sanchez has given you access to the slides, our weekly meetings, site meetings, district committee meetings, meet and confer. With classified that we solved at a lower level through our meet and confer. So Anna, you want to talk just a minute?
Yes, as a classified standpoint, we did, as classified, we do a meet and confer with HR, with Marty, and we voice our concerns and our needs, and we come to a mutual in-between middle ground, sometimes we don't see eye to eye, but we come to a middle ground where we both agree, and also when we see any concerns or problems within the district with our classified staff, or it's gonna, we communicate. We call each other. We feel comfortable now. We built a relationship. We trust each other now, and that's the main thing. You have to build a trust, and relationship to be able to work with each other, unite, and make it a safe environment and healthy for the students and staff. So communication is a big thing, a trust, and that's where you need to start, the trust and building a relationship. And that's what we've done, baby steps. You start in the beginning, but we're getting there, and there's always bumps and bruises, but we seem to work them out, and come to an agreement, middle ground, all the time, give and take, always, and equity, and now we feel we're being valued, we matter, and right now in this situation that we're in, classified is in the front line, protecting and safety and passing out the food, helping food service. So, we need to all work together to make it safe for all the students and staff.
Right. This is
Let me go real quick. Is that Joe? Okay. This is going to sound funny, but the question was, can you be more specific how we did during the troubled times? And Marty's comments were all the processes we did. And this is going to sound really funny, and Joe, you can chime in if you want. Actually, Dr. Joe and I started with food because our relationship was not good. I had just asked for him and Marty to get fired at the board meeting, so that didn't start out very good. And our first meeting was at a local restaurant for breakfast. And I think we talked shop for 5 minutes, and then we talked about each other for the next 40 minutes, like personally. And as those went on, I began to know him as a friend instead of a boss or an adversary. And so I was really, and Dr. Joe can speak, but I didn't want to go. And I was very uncomfortable during that first meeting. But it was easy. After the third one or fourth one, it was common tongue. And we actually do that now with our, Dr. Joy and I'll make a lunch appointment with our site reps and their principal. And we sit down, and they're always scared. Well, what's going on? What's the agenda? What did we do? Nothing. Just, we're going to eat lunch. Well, what do you mean? What are we going to talk about? Whatever you want. So we try to model that with them to help break the ice. Dr. Joe, you want to talk about that a little bit? And then we'll go to
yeah,
the next.
Yeah, very true. Thanks, Greg. It's a great story. It is true that Greg asked the board for my head and Assistant Superintendent Kochevar's head. And so I think what I would want to say to folks is that you're going to have to, in getting started with this, you're going to have a short memory and forgiveness for each other. For some of the things that have gone on historically, you have to get past that. You have to say, look, that's in the past, and you have to move forward. Greg and I got started with just having breakfast and lunch together, and not having a formal agenda, just talking about life. And what you figure out pretty soon is you have a lot in common. The minute you have those conversations, he wanted kids to be successful, and so did I. His core values were very similar to mine, and pretty much we're on the same page, and we're trying to figure out how things got misaligned. And so why should we fight each other and use those energies, which our energies are limited? Instead, let's build a school district that we can all be proud of, and where our kids are successful. And so, you start with those baby steps of trust. And for some, it's having regular meals together. For some, it's taking a van ride to a conference. There's no one right way about doing this, but there is this thing about you need to do things together. And as I talk to districts today, some refuse to do that. And that's a step of courage that I take, because the benefits of this strongly outweigh, the negative impact that it's having on district culture. And what I'm talking about is district culture, and culture is everything.
All right, thanks, Dr. Joe. Thank you, team. You got an insight there in terms of where we came from, everyone. I wanted to have some time for questions and answers, and I'm looking at the time, but I also wanted to share with you what else is included in our PowerPoint, because you have access to this PowerPoint. It's this era of transparency. What you have there is our district, our teacher union website. We also have our district website. It does kind of have some specific documents pertaining to this relationship. Also, I wanted to share with you, as I mentioned before, there's another PowerPoint that we created, really going into specifics and conversations and documentation in regards to that culture building piece that we created at Dinuba Unified. So within this PowerPoint right here, you'll see this story starting to develop and where we came from. But I also wanted to share with you, you need the artifacts and the procedures and the systems in place. So we included some documents so you can have those conversations with your stakeholders. Here's our contact information. Our superintendent is Dr. Hernandez. Again, those are the folks that are here with us today. Wanted to share that with you in case you want to have specific questions or connect with us. We also have some documentations already in how we're going to, the pieces that we said and how decisions were made in terms of closure of schools and how we're going to reopen our schools. So wanted to be transparent with you folks and getting an insight of the decisions that are being made in our school district, and those are really vital in this arena. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions. I know that Mr. Garrison had one question he wanted to answer there.
Yes, thank you. So from the chat, it just says, do you have any holdouts or resistance, and how did you deal with that? Honestly, I'm going to say, it always sounds weird when I say it because I'm talking about myself, but out of the whole group, if you're the teacher, the union president, or even the CSEA president, the classified president, you take all the heat. I have 325 teachers. And so when something happens, I get 325 phone calls, 325 emails, and see, Dr. Hernandez deals with 4 people, the board. So there's a lot of heat on the union leaders. We did have holdouts. We still have a couple, but it's really hard for the guys that are still holding grudges to do that when you have successes. And I think our biggest success, and it's in the original PowerPoint that you have access to, is our academic achievement. Looking at test scores. So ever since we started this LMI process, our test scores in English and math are jumping. Like it's a straight, what's the new term now? Is it L curve? What's for the COVID thing? What do they say? The recovery? Anyway, so it's an upward spiral on both English and math. And so you can track that all the way back to where we started actually having good conversations and trying to work together. But the holdouts are very few now, I think. And I learned, we lost our lights, and I learned how to deal with them on a case by case, but as far as the mob or the mob mentality, that's totally gone now because you can't argue with results. Dr. Joe, you have anything on that?
Oops. No, Greg, you're absolutely correct on that. You can't win everybody at the same time. It takes time to get people to buy into the culture. Literally, though, we created a tidal wave of a new culture, and it just swallows people up. I'll just tell one story here, which might help answer that question. Me and Mrs. Kochevar went to a teachers union luncheon type of a function, and we go out and connect with everybody, shaking hands, and there was one teacher who is gone now, who refused to shake the hand of Mrs. Kochevar, and other teachers were watching that and said, "Oh my, that wasn't very nice. That wasn't very good. I hope that we don't come across that way to them." And seeing those types of behaviors where was a good example to others to say, you know what, we're better than that. We need to reciprocate. And now, in going to those dinners, it isn't just come by and say hi. It's come have a seat. So culture takes time to change, but it will change.
You know, I just want to chime in on that. And Dr. Sanchez referred to some of the documents that are in some of the links that he has. This isn't, the trust and psychological safety doesn't happen by default. It is by design, and it really is a structure to it. So you do have to, we did sit down as an alliance with the CSEA and DTA and administration to decide what structures we would agree to. And those structures are designed primarily to build relationships. And so some of them are not comfortable in the beginning, but if you keep them and you keep at it and you both agree, it's like a marriage. You agree, okay, I'm in if you're in. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be messy, but we're going to agree to agree, and we're going to agree to disagree, or we're going to commit to our structures. And so over time, I think that really probably is the thing that was lacking when we came in and we had the mess that we had. There were no structures. So we know the default, and we also know if we don't maintain this, if we don't keep feeding it, it'll slip and we'll go back. So we know that it continues to take care and feeding.
Yeah, you know, and this is just a kind of a highlight because of the process. And again, we're down the road a few years. We were talking about evaluations. There goes the lights. We didn't have another earthquake. It's okay. Evaluations are always, you know, formidable. You know, it's kind of an I got you is how teachers see it. Admin kind of just see it as I need to check the boxes and move on. So we try to change that to let me help you. So we changed that to like a database. Like you actually have to show proof. And I can't remember the show, but is it Get Smarter? Just the facts, ma'am. Just give me the facts. So we changed our whole process, and actually now when admin are trained or reminded of that process, union teams are there. So it's actually an admin training, but we have union representatives and teachers in the room as well. So we're trying to go to that model to where any decisions that are made, even if it's supposed to be from top down, that it's actually, I call it middle. I don't like from bottom up or top down. It's middle. Everybody's in the room and everybody has a voice or an opinion. And I think it's really worked great. I've had two admin and 2 teachers completely flip their thinking about the other side after being at that event. I had a guy that's, you know, he's supportive. He's a football coach. He helps everybody. You know, he loves the district, but he doesn't want to believe the district. He's always questioned the district's motives and stuff. And after he went to 2 meetings where we were just discussing things, the phone call was actually pretty cool. He goes, "Hey, Greg, I get it. Because now that I've seen behind the curtain, I actually get it. Like, I can trust them now." So that was pretty cool.
I think one more thing, I don't know how much, I know we're running out of time here. I'm reading some of the chat comments. One of the areas that we haven't even talked about is negotiations and how this has affected and impacted our negotiations process and structures. We don't do a traditional negotiations bargaining structure, which is adversarial. We do more of small group problem solving, taking the contract and coming back with a joint solutions to those areas in both our DTA and CSEA groups. Another thing too, we drew our initial inspiration from ABC Unified years ago at an LMI conference, and we haven't forgotten that. They really showed us the way to start and to give us hope for this. And there's a group from TAF that I hope is someday brought to one of these conferences, who came to one of our conferences in Dinuba, and they re-energized us. They have a powerful story of how things were so hostile and so adversarial, and yet despite that, they were able to turn things around, and they're headed in a great direction. So wherever you may be, if you're in those positions right now where things are just hot and adversarial, I offer you that there is hope for you to be able to turn that around.
Dr. Hernandez, there's a kind of related question in the chat if you want to look
ahead.
at that real quick.
Okay, well, okay.
Yeah, just from it, and I know I often think this from an administrative standpoint. I was a teacher, of course, once and started as a principal in this district. I know that our administrators have more training. We've got more management training. I often, tell our leaders that it has to start with us, because the classified folks don't come from that management background and are not as exposed to some of the trainings and restorative justice pieces that we are. And so it has to start here. And I was reluctant as the next person with Greg. I sat next to Greg and he asked for my resignation 2 inches away from the podium, and a very uncomfortable night. And we are like best friends right now. We can call each other about it. He can call me about admin issues, or I can call about teachers issues on the phone all the time. Same with Anna. We didn't know each other, but I think taking baby steps with that and again, agreeing, you got to put your heart out there at some point and be vulnerable. I think vulnerability is a word, and humility are words that Dr. Hernandez has used at times. And it really doesn't matter who uses that word or puts that word on the table, but I think that's what the teams need. And then the trust. Okay, I'm going to take one step forward. If we move it on that, you know what? I think I could take another step. Okay, that went well. Let's take another step. Maybe you take a step back. Ooh, that didn't go so well. Let's talk about that. So we kind of inched along for a little bit, and some places very uncomfortable. But I think a lot of humility, and you can't make people have that, but you can model that with your peer groups. And I don't know, Joe.
Right. Yeah, let me answer that. Yeah, as superintendent, I'm going to answer that question. It's an excellent question, by the way. As superintendent, one of the things that I have is certainly control over who my administrative team is. Mm-hmm. And so before they are brought into their positions, I do something called the heart check. I want to make sure that my admin's core values are in sync with our district values, because if it is not, then it's not going to be a good relationship. So what we've done in the past is I have actually removed administrators that don't get the message. They don't want to work collaboratively. They're into the old model of conflict. That's just not going to work. So that's one thing, is that you have to choose your team members carefully. If they're currently in your team, then it's an important time for the superintendent or other leaders to have a very serious conversation and say, hey, look, we're not going to be adversarial. We're going to be looking at, we want to improve student achievement. We want to create a positive district culture, and we want you to come along. And so you need to have some hard conversations with some folks. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And those are some of the hard decisions. But as a superintendent, you do have control over that, over what the culture is, the expectations. It does start, I think, with the superintendent and the union leaders. And then what I've noticed, at least in our district, is that others, once they see the new norm, they tend to come along and say, okay, these are the expectations for behavior. Not that it's perfect, and it takes time, but ultimately, they feel the pull rather than the push. And then, if necessary, you need to get other leaders that have the right core values and that pass that heart check.
Thank you, everyone. I'm looking at Wendy, and I'm looking at the time, and who are we? We're Dinuba Unified School District, and we identify barriers and create solutions together. And I think one of the biggest things is we take risk, and by taking those risks, we might fail, but we fail on this road to success. And so that's one of the things I appreciate about my district, and I embrace it. I advocate for our district. And so, Wendy and everyone, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time.
Thank you, Jesse.
Contact us. You have our email there too. Thank you, everyone.
Jesse, thanks for your concluding remarks. One question I had is the slide. I know that the PowerPoint will be available. You said there are docs that you can share. Is there a way for you to put the link that docs link into the chat box so that people could actually just copy and paste that now. Because I would love to see what kind of resources you have. Just a thought. So whatever that hyperlink is, maybe you could put that in there. That would be great. And let's see, is there any, I think people are just thanking you on the chat. I just wanted to close by saying, for those of you who joined late, I'm with CDE Foundation, and we wanted to greatly thank the Dinuba Unified School District team for being here and for sharing your story and being courageous and being honest. And you all have worked through a lot of challenges. And so thank you again for making all of these resources available. That's amazing what I'm seeing there, what you were just showing, some of these resources that we can use to apply to other districts.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.